Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So back in the summer of 2021, one of my daughters was driving a Chevy CRUZE that had a lot of miles on it, and she needed to purchase an updated used car with lower miles. And so she did her research, and she found a vehicle that was about a half an hour north of where she lives. And so on the way there, we stopped and got a car wash and vacuumed out the inside and even spent extra to put the shiny stuff on the tires, and the car was looking really great on the outside. But as we were driving there, one by one, the check engine lights started to come on. And this wasn't the first time that a check engine light had come on in that vehicle, hence the need for a more updated used car. But as we drove there, more lights kept coming on, and we kind of drifted onto the lot and put it in park, and the dash was lit up like a Christmas tree. And, there went my vision of getting decent trade money for the trade-in value. And I just basically had to persuade them just to take the car off of my hands. And the car looked great on the outside, but those check engine lights were indicators that there was something that wasn't great on the inside. And that's actually what the word indicator means. The definition for the word indicator is a small, measurable behavior that reveals the health of the larger system. And so not all indicators are bad. Obviously, check engine lights, those indicators, not good. But what about the culture at your school? What are the small, measurable behaviors that reveal the health of the larger system, the health of the culture of your private school? Well, on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss the three biggest indicators of a healthy culture and how to get them at your school. And just quickly, I want to share something with you. I'm excited to offer you this resource as a free gift just to say thank you for listening to the podcast, and it's called The 7 Steps to Improving Teacher Morale. And as private school leaders, we're always looking for ways to improve teacher morale at our schools, but it's hard to know where to start. Well, now you have a step-by-step plan, and you can get that at theprivateschoolleader.com/morale. And again, we're talking about culture today. Obviously, teacher morale is a key part of culture. So you can grab the 7 secrets to improving teacher morale for free over at theprivateschoolleader.com/morale. And then another quick note, and that is that next month, I'm going to have one coaching spot open up, and I would love to work with you and hear more about your biggest challenge, your biggest struggle, your biggest goal, and how I can help you to get what you want. And so just shoot me an email, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com, if that's something you're interested in. You can check it out at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. There's about 24 testimonials there from current and former clients. So have a spot opening up next month, and if you're interested, shoot me an email. All right, so we're talking about the 3 biggest indicators of a healthy culture and how to get them at your school. So I'm going to give you the 3, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about what it looks like, why it's important, and how to get it, and then stick around for a bonus tip at the end if you're really serious about improving the culture at your school. Okay? So the 3 biggest indicators of a healthy culture, in my opinion, are number 1, voluntary participation, number 2, laughter, and number 3, a visible leader. So 3 big indicators of a healthy culture: voluntary participation, laughter, and a visible leader. So like I said, we're going to break these down as to, well, what does that look like? Why is it important? And then how do I get that at my school? So indicator number one is voluntary participation. So from my perspective, what that looks like would be how many students in my middle school come to the middle school winter dance or come to the middle school spring dance. They don't have to come. That's voluntary. And if what we were able to do at my most recent school, we always had over 95% of the middle school students there. Voluntary participation, whether it's sports, whether it's the spring musical, also voluntary participation when students are doing a community service project. And if the day, let's say it's MLK Day and it's a day of service, and how many kids are just not coming in that day? Or do you have a really, really good turnout where almost everybody is there? Students at a fundraising event, like the Day of Giving. So you have Thanksgiving, you have Black Friday, you have Small Business Saturday, then you have Cyber Monday, and then you have Day of Giving. So students on working the phones, I saw that with my own eyes, just a lot of kids in 5th through 8th grade showing up to make those calls. Voluntary participation on Spirit Days, and that's students and staff. If you have a culture where it's Spirit Day and like 10% of your staff is dressing up versus 95% of your staff, that's an indicator of your culture. Same with the students. If everyone thinks, oh, this is stupid, this is lame, and they don't participate, again, voluntary participation. Another example of what it looks like is how long do teachers stick around after a holiday party? Do they come and grab their gift card from the parent-teacher association and then they're like out the door after they grab a cookie? Or are you trying to kick them out after they're there and maintenance wants to clean up the room? 8th graders at my school, this is another example of voluntary participation. Once a month, at our Jewish day school, we had a all-school religious service called Kabbalat Shabbat, and it was always voluntary for the 8th graders to be up front leading the singing. And maybe if you have a religious school, it's chapel or it's mass, and if you go up to 8th grade, if you go up to 12th grade, your student leaders in the school, are they participating? Are they leading? And then also just students coming forward with ideas about initiatives or clubs, and teachers coming forward with ideas about a new initiative or a club or anything. And so those are examples of what voluntary participation looks like, at least from my perspective. So let's talk about, why is this important? Why is this an indicator of a healthy school culture? Well, I have a few things here, a couple bullets in my notes that, first of all, I think it reveals ownership and buy-in, not compliance. So I wrote down it reveals ownership and buy-in, not compliance. So again, kids will do the things and teachers will do the things that they have to do. That's compliance. But that's why I am emphasizing the word voluntary. It's an indicator of the health of the culture of your school when it comes to things that they don't have to show up for, things that they don't have to participate in, but they choose to do it anyways. And it also signals that there's an emotional investment on their part. So, they like their school, they love their school, they want to be part of all of the things. And, let's face it, if you're listening to this and your school culture, or just specifically school spirit, you're like, man, I wish I could get more school spirit in the school. And let's face it, we all have gone down that path of comparison when it comes to Instagram, and you see other schools and the kids are painting their faces and the teachers are into it, and just, it's hard when you don't have an indicator, especially school spirit, and you see that in other places. But we'll get to that in a few minutes as far as like how to fix it, how to get it. But just another one or two notes about why voluntary participation is important as far as indicating a healthy school culture. Voluntary participation shows that people feel safe and connected and proud of your school. Do you think your teachers are proud to work at your school? Do you think your students are proud to attend your school? The more people that can answer yes to that on the staff and among the students, it's an indicator of a healthy culture. Do you think your kids feel safe? And I don't mean physically safe, but emotionally and psychologically safe. Do they feel connected? Do they feel like they belong and that they're part of something bigger than themselves? And then one more reason why I think voluntary participation is important, it's a pretty big indicator of retention. And I mean staff retention, teachers wanting to come back every year, and also student retention. And if your student retention numbers are high, if you're not constantly having turnover in your faculty, then you can really build something there. But when it's a revolving door of students and staff, then it's much more difficult to improve the culture. And then the third piece of this voluntary participation is, well, how do I get it at my school? Okay, so make participation meaningful and not an obligation. So, for example, when I talked about the 8th graders leading Kabbalat Shabbat, from the beginning, when I decided that they were going to lead the singing at the front, I decided this has to be voluntary. But I also, I just didn't want it to be that they were just complying and they were up there because they had to be, because their enthusiasm would or lack thereof would reflect that. And so I'll get to that in a minute about how I encouraged that, and then it turned into a thing. And that's the other point that I want you to remember. If you can get it to a point where the middle school dance is a big thing, or the spring musical is a big thing, or, going from 5th to 6th grade is a big thing, and there's a moving up ceremony or whatever, the more that you can have the little things in your school be a big thing, then those are things that kids look forward to. And when they look forward to something and they know about it, then when they get to do it, quote unquote, get to do it, not have to do it, then they usually are enthusiastic participants in it, and then it just kind of builds on itself. So that's another thing, is how are you promoting these events? These, again, I can only speak to my experience, but with the middle school kids, it's pretty easy to get them fired up about anything. And so I would put an iPad out in the hallway with a countdown clock, and it would be a countdown to the middle school dance, or it would be a countdown to us revealing the spring musical, or it would be a countdown clock to, opening night of the spring musical, or fill in the blank. And I didn't do it all the time, but maybe 4 or 5 times a year. We did it with the science fair, for crying out loud. And we had kids who were standing outside the science fair. It was inside the cafeteria. The doors were locked. It starts at 6 p.m. and that's when it's open to the public, and then the ribbons are on the projects, and there's parents and kids standing out in the hall, and I've got my iPad with the countdown clock, and kids are counting it down like it's the ball drop on New Year's Eve, and then they all pour into the cafeteria for the science fair. So, how do you get to that point? Well, you try and create a culture of anticipation and get really excited about stuff. The school should be a happy place. It should be an exciting place. There should be anticipation for what's coming next. And when you do that, then everything becomes a quote unquote, it becomes a thing to look forward to, a thing to be excited about, a thing to anticipate. And then when kids get to that point, then they usually participate at a high percentage and with a high degree of enthusiasm. So that was sort of my strategy, and it worked really, really well. Another thing on my list here of how do we get voluntary participation is I wrote down celebrate small wins publicly. And so when I would have the 8th graders up there leading, I would make sure I would get a couple pictures of that, and then I would email the parents and attach the photo and just say, I'm so thankful for these student leaders up here leading this religious service. And if there was a behavior that I wanted it to continue, I would shine a light on it, and I would make sure that people knew about it, especially their parents and especially the kids. I would recognize the kids every time. Let's give the 8th graders a round of applause for, leading the service here. So we're shining a light on those things, and that encourages the behavior because people like to get a little bit of recognition. And then we can recognize it in other places like your weekly parent memo or an assembly. And then the other thing, and this is just kind of an add-on, but it's important, is, how do you get voluntary participation? Ask for input from the kids or from the teachers. Because when adults are planning something for kids and they don't ask the kids, usually we miss on what they would want from an interest standpoint. I'm not saying the kids create the whole thing, but the more input, the better. Sometimes it's through student council who are picking the theme for the winter dance, or, it's the teachers who are deciding on, different things within a framework of this initiative. So again, there's a lot there. I don't want to overwhelm you with how to get voluntary participation at your school, but there are some ideas for you there. Okay, indicator number 2 is laughter. So what it looks like, or more accurately what it sounds like, would be teachers laughing with each other in the hallways, students laughing with teachers, having a meeting, let's say it's a middle school meeting or a lower school meeting where there's some moments of laughter or levity or just, fun. Parents laughing with teachers and connecting with teachers or admins at school events. That's what it looks like. That's what it sounds like. And I want to just pause and tell you that the thing that probably filled my cup the most, now I always say the kids are my drug of choice. And so if I was ever feeling down or feeling like I, needed some energy or whatever, I would just go find some happy kids doing interesting things, and that would fill my cup. But from an adult standpoint, when I would hear teachers laughing in the hallway, when I would see teachers hanging out a little bit after school and just enjoying each other's company and laughing, that was probably one of the most significant things to fill me up. And it's amazing. And, maybe you've seen that, maybe you haven't, but we're going to talk about how to get there. So again, an indicator of a healthy culture is laughter. Why is it important? I really believe that laughter is an indicator of psychological safety, because do people laugh when they don't feel psychologically safe? I don't think so, unless it's an awkward laugh that they feel like they're obligated to do. So laughter is an indicator of psychological safety. Psychological safety builds trust, and those two things together help to build a healthy culture. And so laughter also reduces stress and burnout. You know that laughter releases the good hormones, the dopamine, and of course the stress hormone cortisol. If the more we're laughing, the more that dopamine can replace the cortisol. And we have very difficult jobs. Our teachers have very difficult jobs. It can be really intense. There's students' physical health and mental health at stake. Learning, are they going to be ready for what's next? There's a lot of stress and intensity surrounding the school, and that's even before the parents get involved with their capital letters and exclamation points. And so I just think that laughter and joy can build sort of like a buffer or insulation against that daily intensity of private school life. Laughter creates connection and belonging, and it also signals that a group of people enjoy being part of the school and enjoy each other's company. So that's why it's important. Now, how do we get this to happen more at our schools? So you probably already know what I'm going to say, but we need to model what we want to see or hear. And so we need to model joy and fun as the school leader. That means smiling. That means laughing. That means using humor appropriately, letting people see you as a human being, not as some robot. And I've talked to several coaching clients who they got feedback that they were not very happy that they were not approachable, that they didn't have very much joy. And they're like, what do you mean? And so I've heard this from multiple coaching clients that then when they would ask some questions and they would get some honest answers, it really had to do with like the expression on their face, because they were thinking about something and they were heading from point A to point B, and they were kind of just walking past people on their way to point B. You're always on your way somewhere, right? But if we wear our stress on our face, then other people see that, and that's what they're going to model. And I'm not saying that it's an extreme where we're laughing all the time and it's toxic positivity, but I think that we need to remember that even when we don't feel like it on the inside, we can be pleasant and joyful on the outside. And we need to not take everything so seriously and not take ourselves so seriously. And I don't mean that we throw the handbook out the window. I don't mean that anything goes in our schools. I'm just saying that we can still stick to policies and not treat everything like it's a life or death situation. Think about it this way: holding on to things more loosely. You're still holding on to the handbook. You're still holding on to the enforcement of the expectations in the employee handbook. But you're holding on to them a little more loosely and trying to appropriately inject humor, and again, just not taking ourselves so seriously. And then finally, I would say to also build relational time into your calendar. I talk about scheduling your good intentions. And, if it's that recess lunch block, if it is a pop-in 1 hour a week where you try to get to as many classrooms as you can, spending 5 minutes per classroom, if that's in your calendar, you can build that relational time in, and then this gives you the opportunity to be more joyful and to interact with people when that's your intention. Generally, you're going to have the look on your face, the resting face is going to be more pleasant than when you're super stressed out on your way to a meeting that you're late for, okay? And then finally, indicator number 3 is being a visible leader. So what does that look like? Okay, well, this is kind of a no-brainer, but you're present and visible in hallways, classrooms, arrival time, dismissal, lunch, recess, etc. You're accessible to teachers. You show up at student events like games and performances or chapel or assemblies, and you're like, well, I have to show up to all those things. Okay. There's also a middle ground. I know some of my coaching clients feel like they need to show up for every single after-school activity and stay the entire time and be the last one to leave. That's a recipe for burnout. But so that's what it looks like. But why is it important to be a visible leader? Trust grows when people see you, because I came across this quote when I was preparing for this episode. Visibility builds relational capital. Visibility builds relational capital. I've talked before on the podcast about making deposits in everyone's emotional bank account. That's probably a better way to put it. I think visibility and you checking in on people helps you to make those deposits in their emotional bank accounts. Problems, you notice problems earlier if you're more visible. And I'm not implying that the reason you're not visible is because you don't want to be. Probably the number one complaint, or when I ask coaching clients, Thrive Academy students, PSL Pro members, when I ask them to finish this sentence, at school, I wish I had more time to blank. I'd say 95% of them say be out and about in the school and be in teachers' classrooms. And so it's not that we don't have the intention to do it. It's just that the tyranny of the urgent derails that. So I just want to acknowledge that. I'm not saying or trying to imply that your intentions are in the wrong place, but we'll get to that in a second about how do you actually feasibly be a more visible leader. So you notice problems earlier. Teacher morale is higher when a leader is visible. You're a more credible leader when you're more visible, because it's like if you put in some new initiative or some rule about recess and or some rule about, I don't know, some system in the cafeteria, if you're not visible after you like make the decision and announce it, then people are going to be like, well, he doesn't even know what's going on, or she doesn't even see what we see. So again, more credible. So the real question is, well, how do we get it? We have these good intentions. And so we have good intentions that get derailed by the tyranny of the urgent. And so number one, we're going to schedule your good intentions. And I've talked about this before about I think it's way back in episode, I'm not sure, but I'll link it in the show notes, but it's an episode about the 4 productivity hacks for busy private school leaders. And one of them is to schedule your good intentions. And listen, I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'll just give you 2 suggestions on how to be a more visible leader. One is to leverage your high visibility moments. And so not all minutes of the day are created equal. If you're visible at arrival, you're visible during 1 or 2 class changes, you're visible for part of lunch, part of recess, you're visible at, if you're a religious school and you have a weekly or a daily religious service, chapel, or tefillah or mass, then those are minutes where there's a lot of people in the same place and you're visible in those moments. Those are higher leverage moments. You're going to be able to leverage that. And then the second tip is to listen to episode 95. And I will link that in the show notes, which are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 163. And episode 95 is called The 5 Keys to Being a More Visible Leader. And that will help you significantly if you want to be more visible. I did a whole episode on it, episode 95. And if you follow those steps, you will definitely be a more visible leader. And I promised you one big tip or one big strategy if you stuck around to the end. I usually don't give you homework, but this is kind of a combination of our call to action and a tip. And that is in episodes 143 and 144, I did a 2-part episode series on the 5 keys to significantly improving the culture at your school. And if you go back and listen to those 2 episodes, if you follow those 5 keys, you will improve the culture at your school. And so I know that is not easy to do when you're drowning in the overwhelm of the tyranny of the urgent. But if you want to be intentional about it, you can improve the culture at your school. And I've linked those in the show notes, episodes 143 and 144, the 5 keys to significantly improving the culture at your school. And so what are the big takeaways from today's episode? Well, the 3 biggest indicators of a healthy culture and how to get them at your school, in my opinion, are number 1, voluntary participation, number 2, laughter, and number 3, be a visible leader. And your call to action is to listen to episodes 143 and 144. And I'm not saying you can get that done this week, but it is something that if you want to improve the culture at your school, I've given you a framework, a map, a roadmap to get there. So just quickly to wrap it up, a reminder, we were talking about culture today. You can grab the 7 secrets to improving teacher morale at theprivateschoolleader.com/morale. You improve teacher morale, you're going to improve your culture. And also just a quick reminder that I do have one coaching spot opening up next month. And you can email me at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com if you are interested. And a final reminder, theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 163 is where you'll find the show notes and the links to those episodes that I mentioned. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you and all of your hard work. It's just a privilege to be able to take this time to talk to you and to have you take some of your precious time to join me here today on the podcast. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.